I feel like something that can help with the learning of functional programming is to just take a few minutes to talk about some of the advantages of a functional approach. Because when we get into it, you may start to wonder, well, why is this important? Well, all of these things we do in functional programming lead to these advantages. Now, remember, the goal of functional programming is to write separate, independent functions that are put or pieced together to achieve the results we're seeking for. So, here are some advantages of this particular approach. So first off, testing tends to be easier in functional programming because if you think about it, each function stands on its own and can be tested on its own. And so we simply test all the functions. If the functions are working correctly and we piece those together, things should work correctly as well. Now, because functions stand by themselves and don't depend upon other parts of the program, it's pretty easy to reuse functions as well in other projects because that function does usually one thing and it's not affecting things outside the function. So we can just plug it in to another program without causing problems. Now, functions written in a functional style are free from side effects. And this means it's much easier to understand the full purpose of a function because it doesn't depend on things happening outside the function. We don't have to figure out what's going on with this piece of data elsewhere. All we have to do is understand or know what that function is doing, and we can understand the purpose of the function itself. Now, because of these things, functional programs tend to be cleaner and easier to reason about. We can see what a particular function is doing. We can see what another function is doing. We can see that they're pieced together. And that generally makes it easier to reason about the whole purpose of the program and what it's doing. Now, because of all of these advantages that I've been referring to above, this also affects debugging. It usually doesn't take as long to figure out and resolve bugs because, once again, every function is self-contained. We don't have to worry about things outside the function changing our data. So if we realize a problem is occurring in this function, we can address that function specifically and figure out what's going on there. And then this last advantage is similar to the debugging advantage. When we update code, that is many times easier to introduce bugs. Whenever we're working with a program that maybe we haven't worked with in the past or it's been a while, it's pretty easy to introduce bugs when we update that, simply because we may forget about other parts of the program and how it affects the part we're working on. Well, when we update code using a functional paradigm, we don't have to worry about that as much because, once again, the functions are self-contained. So if we update a function here, it affects everything within that function and only within that function. So the data coming in and the data coming out, we know, we understand it's not being changed by other parts of the program. So we may insert another function to do something else. And updating that way is much easier to maintain. We don't break things as often. All right, so enough with the advantages. Let's move on.